it feels like crypto is slowly understanding that it needs to share with society, right? It needs to play ball with society, and that the changes we actually require are exchanging with regulators and with society at large. So it's no longer sort of a isolated one-man show, and more of a collaboration, I think. And this is exciting, in my opinion.
Hey everybody, Tanner here with WAGMI Ventures. On today's episode, we have Clarisse Hagège, co-founder and CEO at DFNS. For anyone who's new, this is the WAGMI Ventures podcast, where we do snapshots with interesting builders, founders, and investors from across Web3. Check out wagmiventures.io to learn more about the syndicate behind the podcast. But for now, let's get into it with Clarisse at DFNS. All right, what's up, everyone? This is Tanner, and this is the WAGMI Ventures podcast. I'm here with Clarisse Hagège, co-founder and CEO at DFNS. Clarisse, how are you doing today? What's up?
I'm good, and you, Tanner?
I'm doing good. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm pumped to get a chance to dive in on DFNS here.
Likewise.
So, before we jump in on DFNS, I'd love to just learn a little bit more about your path, because you've had this really interesting journey thus far with time in finance and as an EIR with Techstars and others. Can you maybe give us a quick narration of your crypto journey, specifically alongside your professional journey leading up to the founding of DFNS?
Sure, my pleasure. And thank you again, Tanner, for having me. So I started in finance in 2009. Great timing, as you can see. I started first at Goldman Sachs, where I was doing equity research. Then I moved on to global wealth management at BAML, then moved on to Crédit Agricole CIB in New York, where I actually held different positions. But I think something that was very interesting, at least to me, during those different roles within different institutions and across different departments, was that I always wanted to fix inefficient processes. And in 2013, 2014, we started hearing about blockchain, entering the banking world, blockchain and mostly private blockchain at the time. And it was looked at a technology that could improve some processes. And so since that time, I started looking at that space and was actually very much involved in the industry. I even started building a remittance app. It was far too soon. The technology was not there. Actually, smart contracts did not even exist at the time. But then I got the chance to actually advise a startup that was incubated by the bank I was working at, Crédit Agricole. It was a name service built on Cosmos. And so as I was helping them selling their token to small institutional investors, what I realized is that the biggest blockers of my sale were neither the project, the nature of the project, or even the appetite of investors, because you could assume that in 2019, some investors wanted to stay, very far away from crypto. But no, the blocker was actually the closing process, right? I met family offices, small asset managers that were ready to get a check. But when you were telling them you can have a private key, there was so little options for them to secure this private key that the deal would fell off pretty much. And so to me, it was an important realization, because I was absolutely convinced that blockchain would change the way we approach all things within a bank, right? Cash management, trade finance, debt capital markets. Yet in 2019, during this summer, I realized that managing your private keys is still a nightmare, right? So between that realization and the need to actually build that infrastructure to enable those developments, I actually arrived as an outsider in this industry with, I would say, no preconceived ideas about how you should build Web3 infrastructure. And so what I did was actually take a hard look at the data, right? And when you take a hard look at the data, what you actually realize is that human error was the main factor for asset loss. And in 2020, 20% of all Bitcoins had been lost to actually misuse of private keys, according to even studies that were held by Chainalysis. So in other words, what we needed to do was not only to protect assets from attackers, but we needed to protect assets from users themselves. And to me, that created a shift in how we envision wallet infrastructure solution at that time. And this has remained core to our vision since then, right? So we've implemented a dual security approach, not only to optimize for security, but also to optimize for recovery. And actually, we often say that, well, security is very important, but to some extent, business continuity is even more important than security. And I guess at the time, the second observation was that there was a lack of, or I'm going to take the problem the other way around. All the solutions that were on the market were very much UI centric. They were dashboard first. And so there were no great developer friendly platforms for wallets yet. And in my opinion, I was, obviously very much conscious that the crypto investor was the first use case, very mature use case. But what was interesting to me was the second wave, right? The builders wave. So in my opinion, that lack of API first solution, that lack of developer tool was a strong limiting factor to the plurality of use cases one could build in Web3. And this is why I launched Defense.
Very cool. Okay. So obviously things have matured a lot since that founding moment. And so I'm curious if you could just sort of sum up for us or explain what Defense is and what you seek to enable with what you're currently building, kind of in its totality.
Yeah, of course. We are a wallet infrastructure for Web3. People also say wallet as a service platform, right? And in 2020, when we launched, we're actually the first provider developing an API-first wallet infrastructure. Since then, we've become the backend for many institutions and governments such as Fidelity, Tokeny, ABN AMRO, Asset Reality, AAA, Atlantis, Bridge, and other fintechs. But also for large organizations and brands like FIFA entering Web3 or IWC, Breitling, Lacoste, and other large brands. And so what wallet infrastructure actually means is different things, right? But for most, and for every single wallet infrastructure out there, at the heart of the wallet infrastructure, you have a key management service, right? And for us, we started with MPC. We actually fell in love with MPC in 2019 because of its properties to decentralize the key. It was absolutely revolutionary to me. MPC could unlock security, continuity, and so we decided to become experts in MPC, and we hired the best cryptographers and R&D engineers to implement our own MPC protocol that we actually open sourced a few weeks ago. We've released today the first CGGMP 21 implemented in Rust open source lib, which is audited. And so we're very proud of that. But now we do much more than just key management service, right? Key management service is sort of the base layer, but we don't just do distributed key generation and signature as a service. We've also built the blockchain interfacing capabilities, right? And so that means you do more than signing. You can broadcast a transaction on chain. You can interact with smart contracts in a very simple way through our APIs. You don't actually need to be familiar with the semantic of the underlying chain you are using, right? We're simplifying the developer experience around this interaction with the blockchain. And so you can also do other functionalities such as indexing the chain through our services. And so I would say that the blockchain interfacing capability part plus the key management service are what strongly compose a wallet as a service, right? Those two components are very much core to what is a wallet as a service. Now, there's some also nuances, right? Because if you want to build a secure WAS, you would also need to add on top of that authentications API. And you need to also add a governance layer so you can actually apply permissions to your user. You can apply a quorum to your admins. You can apply policies to your transaction. So today we have clients that are regulated. They develop custodial wallet infrastructure, leveraging omnibus setup, right? So they are completely custodian on their assets and they've leveraged Defense to build those setup. But we've also have dApps, tokenization platforms, investment apps that embed the non-custodial infrastructure within that platform. And I think something that is very important for us, and this is one of the reasons why we started Defense in the first place, is to actually build a composable wallet infrastructure. You can use us only for the signing part. You can use us for the entire service. And what we've realized is that all our clients have very different approaches. They want this flexibility. And this is something we've noticed from the start, right? So that composability in terms of key deployments, in terms of backups, in terms of signatures, in terms of transaction is actually crucial to the way we've developed Defense.
Hey everybody, quick thing here. We're excited to announce WAGMI Advisory, your home for all things fundraising, hiring, and partnerships. This is all about supercharging your project with the WAGMI network consisting of over 20,000 executives, investors, and builders in crypto, all ready to come alongside your project to help it succeed. Get in touch at team@wagmiventures.io to learn more and figure out if WAGMI Advisory is the right fit for your project. Now, let's get back to the show. Super interesting. Okay. So, just in the research I was doing, Defense obviously seems to take security super seriously and has from the start to enable what you're enabling. And so I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about how your team thinks about security here in 2024, when it comes to everything you've been building, what's important to get right there, in other words?
Thank you for this question, Tanner. This is indeed a very serious subject, and it's a question we like to address, and we've been addressing from the beginning at Defense. And when you pause a second on this topic, you actually realize that wallet infrastructure providers are the backbone of the Web3 industry, right? So if you want Web3 to strive, you need to have a sound and safe infrastructure. And that's, again, very core to our vision. We have in mind every day that we're building for the future. We're building for the long term. We are a piece of infrastructure that is absolutely critical. And actually, you can see people embed a wallet, they buy a custody solution, and they keep it for years, right? Those are very much embedded infrastructure. So security for us is omnipresent at Defense. We have a mission, and this mission is to make sure that Web3 stays safe. And so it starts from the culture we've built internally. For instance, if you read our employee handbook that you receive on your first day at Defense, you'll see that security is everywhere. It goes from, the fact that every single employee will log in to their workspace using YubiKeys to the fact that we are educating constantly on the best practices. So we've put a lot of efforts to create the discipline that our clients deserve, right? I would go as far as saying that, for instance, we've, for a long time, prioritized product and security over sales and marketing. For us, we were absolutely obsessed with having the most secure, strongest product out there. And that, for instance, can be reflected in the hires we've made very early on. So, for instance, today, our CTO is the ex-VP of engineering at Gemini. Our head of security was head of security at Stellar. We have, and he was actually also a former French armed force as well. He worked in the French army. And our chief science officer is one of the most cited cryptographer in the world, right? That's it. So concretely, besides having chosen MPC technology to secure the key and having very much, I would say, deep conviction in the fact that MPC is the future of digital asset security, we decided to invest in that technology, to pioneer that technology, and to build that dual security layer that differentiates us from most of the providers out there. And what's very telling is that the reason we've done that is because we try to really look at the best practices out there. And too often it seems to me, I don't know if you share this opinion, Tanner, but it seems to me that people build in Web3 as if nothing existed before. But key management is far from being new, right? Banks have been managing encryption keys for decades, since the 70s. And for instance, one of NIST's main guidance in their key management framework, in actually the part 1 of the key management, in their key management framework, section 6224, is to always separate sensitive keying material from usage and applications. In other words, you should never put private keys on your phone to conduct daily task operations. That doesn't work. That's just bad security practice, right? Yet, almost every single MPC implementation out there, Fireblocks, Coinbase, will go and distribute key shares in phones still today. And for us, this is just fundamentally bad security practice. And so we try to really, grab the best practices that have been out there for decades and try to adapt that in the context of digital asset security. On top of that, we leverage authentication API based on cryptography as well to onboard users. So they never have to carry with them the private key material. It's just authentication secrets they have, right? So let's say you're an organization, right? And you implement Defense. Tomorrow, your employees leave. You have one employee that decides to move on to his next role. Well, you don't need to redo a key signing ceremony, right? You just revoke their access. This is just easy management for large organization. The same way it goes for an end user, right? If you, let's say your grandmother or your mother even tomorrow uses Venmo to actually transfer crypto, well, you don't put private key material in her application because she wants to transfer crypto with Venmo, right? You just enable her to have access to the management or the network we use to actually safekeep those private key shares. So this is how we do things, and that's, I would say, very fundamental. And this is how we think we can actually protect our clients and end user from themselves on that front, right? So these are for us very crucial architectural designs. But when you talk about security, in my opinion, it goes also further, right? For instance, we regularly pen test and audit our code, but we also make it accessible to our clients. There's no reason why they should not read the code audits we've received. And also, we've been very early on big advocate of becoming SOC 2 Type 2, but not just audited by any audit company. We've actually been audited by Deloitte, and I think being assessed by a Big Four on that front is makes a big difference in the way you actually conduct those compliance framework internally, right? So these are, I would say, everything we have in mind when we talk about security at defense. It goes from product, architectural design, but also culture and the discipline we put around maintaining the discipline to actually avoid for any issues internally or externally.
Yeah, super interesting. Okay. You guys have clearly put a lot of thought into this. So, I'm curious if just maybe jumping to kind of a recurring question here on this podcast. I'm always very interested in sort of the early challenges in the life of an organization, because I think they often shape how things are thought about and worked on in subsequent steps after early challenges are solved. And so I'm curious if you could maybe talk about one or two early challenges at Defense and how you and your team thought about solving for those.
I guess for us, one of the big challenge we had was sort of outward facing, right? Is that there was a lack of security concerns with the early stage startups we had started, selling to. Pretty much developers wanted to build fast and get their MVP to the market as soon as possible. And so they would choose speed of development over any sort of additional benchmark, right? That would lead them to have different conclusion on the solution they were facing. So first, there were two challenges on that. So first of all is that we decided to become also better at developer experience, right? Because at the end of the day, we also wanted our product to be easy to build with. So this was not an alternative anymore, right? You could pick defense and build fast plus have a secure product. So we support a very different SDKs, React Native, TypeScript SDKs. And so we've definitely made some progress there. But on top of that, we try to educate all the time when we have prospects on the phone, right? We try to present to them that though it may sound difficult to witness, what's a secure providers from another one, pretty much, you try to actually show them that if you drill just a little bit in a product, the difference can be as big than, differentiating a village from a fortress, right? So it's actually educating in looking at the various points you need to think of when actually benchmarking a provider.
Really interesting. Okay. So I'm curious, just jumping ahead, I'd love to almost ask some questions about the space more broadly, but maybe one last question here on defense, where I'm curious, as you think about the trajectory coming up of what you're building at Defense, what gets you personally most excited as you think about maybe the next 6 months to a year?
Very interesting question. Well, we want crypto to be everywhere with everyone. I think this is what we're obsessed. We're obsessed with to make sure that we enable developers to build scalable use cases. And for crypto to be everywhere, well, we need wallets to be everywhere too, right? And so one exciting prospect for us at Defense is the idea that in the years to come, you'll always have an alternative to, and logging via MetaMask. Pretty much, you always have an embedded wallet option, so you can actually envision a world where you have more mass adoption of the technology we are building. Right. Another thing that excites us is the fact that none of these wallets ever get hacked. We want 0 wallets hacked, and that's actually the North Star metric for us at Defense, which is one of the core KPI. And I would say the first point keeps us up in the morning, and the second one keeps us up at night.
Yeah, super interesting. Okay. So let's take that step back, and I'd love to ask you some questions about the space more broadly, just given your interesting vantage point here, where I think my first question might be, how has crypto changed since you've been in the space?
Interesting. Well, it has changed quite drastically, in my opinion. It feels like it's been decades already when it's been only 4 or 5 years. But first, I would say, when you look, and if I were to have a more chronological approach, when you look at 2019, 2020, that was pretty much basically the last chapter of the Wild West era for crypto. It was very still driven by trading use case, and the big players were well identified. Now, post the collapse of FTX, Celsius, Luna, 3 Arrow Capital, pretty much post the end of 2022, most of the big players were gone. And suddenly you were as far as you could be from this freestyle market I actually known, right? The market I entered in. And so regulators started putting an end to the shenanigans and that happened in the space. And I don't know if you agree, but I felt like, especially last year, the new sexy became compliance. How do you become more compliant? And to me, it feels that as if crypto has become less of a revolution and more of a technological enhancements for finance or other use cases. And so it feels like crypto is slowly understanding that it needs to share with society, right? It needs to play ball with society. And that the changes we actually require are exchanging with regulators and with society at large. So it's no longer sort of a isolated one-man show and more of a collaboration, I think. And this is exciting in my opinion. And maybe I would say, I think just to build on also, what we've tried to brought in this space and other competitors, right? I think now that you do have better infrastructure solutions, and when you take this wider context, that also has led to the emergence of very new use cases, which pretty much were the use cases we would imagine being built on defense when we launched in the first place. So that's also very exciting for us.
Super interesting. Okay. So if I were to ask you to maybe go back to the beginning of your journey as a founder and impart some advice from your current wiser self, I'm curious, what advice do you think would be most generalizably helpful for others to kind of listen in on that you might want to share to your earlier sort of newer self at the whole founder thing?
Well, there's a ton. You learn every day. I would say one that is not just particularly true to my own journey in crypto, but I think that is super important if you're a founder in the crypto industry is not to forget that crypto is like any industry. You need to build things that people want, right? And that's how you will find some product market fits. And I think we're moving more and more towards that scene, though. For a long time, we've built technology for technology's sake, right? And not for use cases. And so I think that would be the first advice, right? Which is build things that people want. Then something that is probably more personal is surround yourself with, the best expert in your field, because that's how you save so much time, right? You save time by hiring well. And to me, this is something that I've, come to realize, a few years in this venture. And it's probably the best advice I could ever give.
Love it. Okay. So a couple last questions here for you, Clarisse. If I were to say the future of crypto is blank, how would you fill in that blank in the most concise but accurate way to your perspective?
I would say the future of crypto is real. Yeah, it's absolutely real. And I'll go back to what I was saying about use cases. So there's one massive and major use case, which is trading, but we see many more being developed. And actually, if you look at the applications that are developed on defense today, the largest segments is payments. So anything that goes from cross-border payments, remittance app, neobanking, payroll leveraging, stable coins, etc. So those are, I think, real use cases that solve tangible pain. This is definitely interesting. We see also at defense, we see also tokenization moving very fast, right? And over the past 8-9 months, we've onboarded a ton of tokenization platforms in very different area, right? Whether you're looking at real estate, gold, money markets, IP, and I think this is also super interesting. Sorry. Another area where we see also real initiatives is on new exchanging being built that are giving back control to the end users, right? And so that's also initiatives that stem from real pain, right? That we've all witnessed a few years ago. And last, maybe two other points that to me are also very much hopeful for the future. The first one is that you start seeing large industrial companies, large consumer brands looking at crypto and NFT in particular, not for marketing purposes, but as a way to actually create new business model and to improve the circularity of business model, right? And so you'll see car manufacturers that will only be able to produce electric companies for the near future, trying to assess, all right, how am I going to make up for the revenue I'm not going to make from selling cars that are just lasting longer, right? And suddenly NFT becomes a way to incentivize the car manufacturer in the secondary market share. And so there's a lot of initiative like that. And I think this is very interesting because it's actually taking properties, right, of NFTs and trying to build a positive business model around those positive externalities. And maybe the last one, which is much lower revolution, and it will take much longer time. I think you start seeing large banks that are changing the way they were operating certain division. So not everything is completely disrupted, but you're seeing tokenized deposits starting to be more and more adopted within large US banks, mostly tokenized bonds. So you see all these large banks in Europe contributing to CBDC initiatives and spending a lot of time and effort, right, to understand what's going on. And so, yes, so that means to me that this is not just, it's something that is very much real and very much in progress. And so every year that passes, we are actually making progress and going forward, right? And so this is also very helpful.
Love it. Okay. Clarisse, one last question here for you. What is your team working on right now? And what's the best way for people to follow along on the journey?
Yeah, we're working on several initiatives, obviously. I would say the most exciting maybe on the institutional side is around wallet orchestration features that we are developing to respond to client requests who are demanding for more and more granularity in transaction management. So we're building policies as code, which we call PAC. We're also working on developing key protocols in FIPS 143 certified HSMs, and they will be tested by NIST Labs. Why are we doing that? Because we do believe that standardization is super important to also take this industry forward, to bring clarity to people when they're actually benchmarking solution. And actually, one of our advisors, Nigel Smart, was the co-founder of Unbound Security, which was acquired by Coinbase. To this day, they were the only provider that managed to achieve combining MPC with NIST-certified HSM. And so we do believe that this is something that is very important for the institutional market. And this is a journey we have started alongside, standardizing MPC, where there again, we've contributed to the standardization effort that was launched last year. And out of 5 papers that were selected by NIST, 3 came from defense. So really much trying to contribute in that space. And I would say for fintechs and enterprise, the subject is maybe slightly different. We've worked a lot on latency, both for the key generation and the signing speed. So for instance, to give you an example, today with our optimization on the current paper we're leveraging, which is CGG MP21, we're able to achieve 10 signatures per second. But we have developed a brand new MPC protocol that we're implementing right now and will be live at the end of Q2 with the Dr. Jonathan Katz, which we call KU23, the new protocol. And that will enable to achieve sub-millisecond signing. And that's a big breakthrough for MPC, right? So not only does KU23 provide speed enhancement, but it also enhances something that is super important for a lot of use cases, which is service availability, which is completely critical for, let's say, payments use cases, right? If you're offering a payment infrastructure to merchants, right? You cannot have your service just go off for 4 hours. You need absolutely a very strong service availability. So those are the subjects that are taking a lot of time and for which we'll have very interesting achievements and release this quarter. In other words, we're building the market's fastest MPC, and this is something that has been in our mind for forever. So we're quite excited about that. And yes, if people want to follow our journey, please, you can follow us on LinkedIn or on Twitter. We now have blog, and also don't forget to check out our GitHub, as we have already started releasing open source components, but we'll keep going on that front.
Amazing. Clarisse, thank you so much for coming on the show. Fascinating work you guys are doing, and I'm thrilled we got a chance to dive in today. So have a great start to your week here, and thanks again.
Thank you so much, Tanner.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, go ahead and maybe give us a good 5-star rating and subscribe wherever you're getting your podcasts so you can get all the latest conversations with the most interesting crypto founders, investors, and builders from across the world. Thanks so much. Have a good one.